No, we don't want the recording in progress. Good morning, everyone. I have 11 o'clock and lots to share, so we're going to start. And people can come in as they get a chance to sign in. I'm Nancy Phillips, and I coordinate the Illinois Family Resource Center. And I've been doing things in this field for over 40 years. So I've been around and seen a lot of change. Many of you have probably been on webinars with me before or conferences. So you know my story, but I'll very quickly do it. If you look at my initials after my name, they're ones that have been hard earned, but the one that means the most to me is the PLE, and that's a person of lived experience. I am the family member with lived experience through 4 generations of substance use disorder and a couple of people with some pretty serious mental health issues. So a lot of what I'm sharing today is things that I learned not only through my work and research, but through life experience. And I know that many of you on here are going to be the same. So the one thing I will ask you is be aware of your triggers as we talk about things. Know how to take care of yourself, and we'll have a really good hour. Excuse me. This is parenting again, known as grandparenting and Kincare. I have done some versions of this both at conferences and on webinars before, but it's absolutely important to me because we see an increase continuing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Unfortunately, my voice is wanting to give way this morning, so we'll just keep plugging along. If you have any comments or questions, put it in chat. I have Kyle Hauser here, who's going to be monitoring that, providing Zoom behaves. We've had Zoom problems before. We are recording this, and it will be placed on the Family Resource Center website probably within 2 days. Usually my person has them posted immediately. So they'll be available going in there. We have a YouTube channel if you flip on there. I am going to move ahead and let's do this. I've got lots of information. This is a basic webinar that I have done, and there has been so much research and stuff come out in the last couple of years that we are going to bump it up a notch. There is a whole series of things on grandparenting and the heroin opioid impact and relationship stuff. And then at the end, I'm going to share with you a new series of videos that we purchased that just came out this year that can give you all kinds of wonderful information. As we've done our webinars, we have partnered up with Ross Council here at the Our House. The Our House holds the contract with the Department of Human Services, the Division of Substance Use Prevention and Recovery, for the Family Resource Center. As of April 1, we're starting our 9th year. What was interesting is this was a pilot project that was going to last a year or two, but the need for families and the need for people wanting to learn how we take care of our families and how we take care of our little ones in the middle of all this chaos has been important. And we've just grown and linked with all kinds of other statewide organizations and agencies, and I think that we're making an impact. But as part of Ross, I think that it's so important people understand that, and Kyle is part of Ross here in our area. And so I'm going to invite him just to give you a little bit of an overview of what it is, and then we will get on with talking about Kincare and grandparents.
Thanks, Nancy. As she said, I work for the ROS program, which stands for Recovery Oriented Systems of Care. I work as a recovery navigator, so I meet with those in their addictions and those who have been clean for multiple years. And I'm that extra layer of support, and I help them. I'm like a resource broker to them. What we do as a ROSC is we go into communities and make that recovery conducive to recovery. You know, we identify bridges and gaps, and then we try to work as a collective unit for the community. So we have people from judges, probation, treatment providers, mental health, healthcare, as well as those in recovery. And we all come to the table and we work together on goals after we identify what each community needs, and we work towards them together. And East Central Illinois, Rosk, we have 6 councils, which makes up for 8 counties. And just a couple brief things that we've done, we've gotten some of our peers, recovery navigators in the jail, doing groups and just working with people one-on-one and providing them education. We have gotten people that we work with into treatment, rides to treatment, housing. We're working on volunteer lists for each county. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff that we've been able to do, because in our area is primarily rural, so there's a need for this. So I'm just excited because we're actually starting to get going now, and it's really an opportunity that I didn't have when I was first getting into recovery myself. So I'm just grateful to be a part of it. And thank you, Nancy, for having me on to help you co-host.
No problem. I appreciate the help. You see here is the IllinoisFamilyResources.org, the website, and I invite you to please go on there and make comments. Email me back with information that you want or isn't there. This, as you notice, is probably looks like another new email address, and it is, but I am still also linked to the others. Most of you probably know what the Family Resource Center is, but I'm going to do a really quick advertisement. The goal is to provide information and support around substance use disorder, mental health issues, and gambling disorders, which is now becoming a very recognized and concerning issue in the state of Illinois. And we provide information about the resources for human service providers, for parents, for significant others, for communities. Do a lot of work with Ross councils through a variety of things. And as we go through some of this, I may share some of it, because just finished up a train. We brought in some national trainers for celebrating families, and the 4 teams that went through that were all Ross councils, which meant that it wasn't just professionals, but it was other people that care about their communities, and it was recovery navigators, and it was therapists. It was this whole variety of people that went through, and that's exciting to me. We can do this through the website postings, which is done on a regular basis. We have a Facebook page. We do monthly webinars, and in May and June, I have a guest. Pam Wall's going to be doing some really dynamite webinars for us. I've worked with her for years and decided it was time to bring in another face besides mine. She does a lot of work nationally, and I feel really privileged that she's going to be working with us. I will be sending you those links when I send out things following the training. We can do technical assistance and facilitation for you. We can do personalized in-service presentations. If there's a webinar you really like and you go, but it doesn't quite fit with what's going on in my area or my organization, we can do an individualized in-service either by Zoom or in person. I do a lot of conferences and exhibits. I was just looking at my schedule this morning, and I have 4 conferences this fall that I need to get my workshop information in and exhibits reserved. And I just go through all kinds of research. And what I hope to get out to you today, and my wish for you, is to share your experience with working with grandparents and family members. Kinship, that term is changing because there's such an escalation in family members taking on that parenting role. A lot of it, I won't say primarily, but much of it is through the heroin and opioid issues that are out there. And we've known for the last 10 or 15 years that that was impacting grandparents assuming that role. But we're seeing more and more younger people, even in my family. I've done 2 generations of guardianship that I would never, ever would have thought would have happened in my family. But substance use is not picky. And did 2 different kinds of guardianship. And I have a granddaughter that has taken on guardianship of her niece due to substance use. So it's kinship. It's looking at that whole area of family members stepping up and assuming that role. And what do we do to support? We're going to explore a little bit about the research around the substance use and the impact regarding the need for parents to be released from that parenting role, at least temporarily. We're going to learn about the issues generated for grand families and kinship care. And some of this I had to learn on my own. I wish somebody had been around to say, you need to look at this. This is a resource for you, etc. But more and more that's being offered just like we are, because now we're recognizing that it's such an issue. Oops, I never turn this thing the right way. Throughout the presentation, I'm going to have some books here. I will send the presentation to you afterwards so that you can go back and look up things that you may want, resources you may want, just information that you want. This is one of my very, very favorite books around grandparents raising their grandchildren. And I don't have time to give you a personal story, but there's a link with my 5-year-old great granddaughter that we had guardianship of for a while that made this book very special to me. As we look at as we look at the information that's out there, a lot of the really strong research and information is coming through an organization called Generations United. And this is from their they do a yearly overview of everything going on in the United States around they call them grand families, but they also recognize that much of this is also other kinship. The last year when the report came out for 22, showed that one of the biggest issues that seems to be growing, especially for older people taking on that role, is supporting nutrition, health, and well-being of grand families, that it's just not as strong as it should be. We have 8 million children in the United States living in households that are not headed by their parents. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're in and out, but we know we have 2.5 million children that are in households without their parents present. And I have been in a situation of both with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And it shows 137,000 plus number of children in foster care with relatives. But as you look at the other research that's out there, it's much higher than that. And if we look at grandparents responsible for grandchildren, it goes down here and gives you some of the demographic information from that. I'm not going to go through it in whoops, there we go, in detail. The computer I'm on is not my favorite one to do webinars from, and it has a tendency to jump all over the place. But I like to say I am in my office occasionally, not just at the kitchen table. We know that 42% of grandparent-headed households with grandchildren under 18 and no parent is present, 42% have low incomes and have participated in SNAP. Oops, there we go. Daggone. In Illinois, this is from the year before. They didn't do an individualized state one in quite the same way this time, but we were looking at 263,000, almost 64,000 children living in homes where a relative's head of the household, not their parent. 85,000 being raised by kin with no parent present. 7,679 children in foster care being raised by kin. Keep that, hang on to that terminology, being raised by kin. We have almost 72,000 grandparents responsible for their grandchildren in Illinois. And this is what makes me sad. And this is what's kind of frightening to me. For every child raised by kin in foster care, recognized foster care, there are 10 being raised by kin outside of foster care, which means that a lot of their resources are limited, or they haven't had an advocate, haven't known where to find an advocate to help them have the resources they need to help take care of those children. That means for every one child in foster care that we know about, it is estimated that there are 10 outside of that system that can give them support. How did we get to this place? Let's take a look at it very quickly. This is one of my favorite overheads that came through a webinar that Generations United did. But this is looking at the dynamics of the children that come into the system. This was part of a webinar that was done by the Child Welfare League and Excellence in Kinship Care. And it's one that does a lot of really good work in looking at child welfare systems, court systems, and the other resources that are out there that can help support kinship care. If we look at home life, it's chaotic, it's unpredictable home life, inconsistent parenting, lack of appropriate supervision. These are all things that have been, we know this is part of the chaos of living in that family, but these are some of the main things that seem to draw and be recognized to draw children out of the home and take that parenting role away. Inconsistent emotional responses from parents, secrecy, parental behavior that may make the child feel guilt, shame, or blame when they're actually talked about, when an investigation is done, emotional changes we see in children. And I've seen these in children. They develop feelings of believing they have to be perfect, because then nobody's going to know what's going on in the chaos I live in. Believing they have to be perfect is a tough thing. My father, highly functioning alcoholic, but for a lot of my younger life, I thought I had to be perfect. I totally relate to that. They believe they have to be a parent to their parents. If some parents can't function, they have siblings that need to go to school and need breakfast, but the parent's not available to take care of them or to even get them there. Oftentimes they will step into that role. And that's often called the role of the hero. Difficulty trusting others and maintaining a sense of attachment. When you have someone that you can't rely on that is supposed to be taking care of you, and there's no consistency, you don't know where the next meal's coming from, or maybe you do, but you don't know who's going to get up with you the next morning to make sure everything's okay for you to get to school, who's going to sign the school forms that you need signed, who's going to take care of seeing that you have your bottle and your diaper changed if you're a little one. Difficulty in trusting others, and that sense of attachment that's so, so important for our young ones gets compromised. Difficulty achieving positive self-esteem and autonomy. Oftentimes then it generates either extreme shyness or aggressiveness, those opposite ends of the continuum. And then adjustment difficulties. Kids who grow up in an inconsistent environment or with limited guidance are at risk for resistance to rules or authority. Experimentation with or use of alcohol or other drugs. Social withdrawal. Difficult relationships with peers, adults, and others. We know that children that grow up in this type of environment learn the 3 rules that have been around forever: don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And that's exactly what fits in with this dynamic examples that Generations United has given us. Boy, this is sensitive this morning. When grandparents or other relatives become full-time parents, it may be due to the parents away in the military, the child is having problems with their social development, their parent may be in the Department of Corrections, or unfortunately, it may be the death of a parent. But the research has shown through the Illinois Bar Association, through Grandparents Raising Grandchildren, Generations United, just look at the research that is out there. And there's a correlation between the alcohol and drug use and neglect on the part of the parents. I was reading something from the National Association for Children of Addiction this morning, and they were quoting information that has come through child welfare at almost averages 50% or more of the cases involve substance use that they see. And in about 40%, in some of the areas, it was showing an addition of physical issues along with that. So that's kind of concerning. We also know that parents may be mentally ill, incarcerated, or simply unable to care for their children. So the children end up in kinship. This is a quick definition. Children in kinship care refers to situations where they're cared for by full-time by blood relatives or other adults. Or it may be somebody that they have a family-like relationship with, such as godparents or really close family friends. In my family, there are a couple of people that we've been very close to that are like family. They're not blood relatives, but they are family, and they would be ones that would certainly step up to the plate if there was the need. Kinship care is when a parent is not present in the household and the child is either related to at least one other person in the household, such as a sibling, a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, or is listed as a non-relative of the householder, yet it's a family friend or a trusting person. This comes from Children in Kinship Care from the Kids Count Data Center. I'm going to be sending a lot of these items to you when I send out your certificates and things. These are resources that I've got that I think can be useful to you. You may be the next door neighbor, and that may be why you're on here. You're just curious to find out a little bit more about it. That's good, because the more people that know how to help kin care providers find the resources they need, the healthier our children are going to be. And maybe that'll help put some families back together. But based on all that, this is going on, somebody calls and the hotline makes a report. 2 kids showed up at school really upset, obviously not stable, not being taken care of. And then you're sitting in your office. This is me. I was the grandparent sitting in my office, and the call comes. We have removed your grandchildren from the care of their parent. We need to talk with you about taking on that role. And all these things hit you at once: fear, sadness, anxiety, sense of relief. I'm going, thank God. I knew things weren't good. I didn't know where to go to get that help for those kids that they needed. And it's an all over the place feeling. And there are a lot of people out there providing care that have experienced this. There's another one of my good books. So You're Raising Your Grandkids. This is a really wonderful, and it addresses a lot of the things around grief issues of different things that children may experience and the grandparents. Unique challenges start to happen when you take on that role, providing care for your grandchildren or your niece or your nephew. And oftentimes we know that children are placed, as are you, in a traumatic situation. And it's unexpected. I often hoped that it would happen because I knew that my grandchildren weren't where they needed to be. I was concerned about their parent, but you have to be careful. You walk softly, because if you raise too much question, you're butting in, and you may not be allowed to see those children so that you can even monitor what the care is. Grandparents and family members, kin care, are placed in really awkward positions. Services and supports depend a lot on whether there is child welfare involvement. Generations United provided this too, but I think that it's even a little more than that. If a child's in foster care, an agency has legal custody. So services and supports are assessed through that system, and people are guided for help through that system. But if it's outside of foster care, legal authority impact is often a barrier to services and supports, because you don't have the legal papers that you need. The 2 times that we went around, we had ended up with full guardianship of our granddaughters due to primarily to mental health and some substance use issues with a daughter that we had adopted. The next time, the parents both had legal issues and were not available to care for the child. It was never really placed in our care. We weren't sure where that child was going. and the parents asked us to take that guardianship. So we did. But that meant that we had to file and get that legal authority and pay for those services. So it's an overwhelming thing to be involved in, yet we've got to take care of our little ones. We know that kinship and family strengths children can survive. It's much better than going to an outside system. How those families are structured looks very different. And that's for the next workshop. There's a lot of research out there about the positives and negatives, the pro and con of Kincare, although that by far outshines the other, but looking at how entire families restructure when that happens. Kinship care benefits just are absolutely overwhelming. Children have better behavioral health outcomes. They stay connected to their siblings a lot more likely. They keep their cultural identity and community connections if they're placed with kin. And it's important for our children to keep some of that cultural identity as long as it's safe. We want them to have those connections, those community connections, so they still feel like they're a part of something that's important and larger, more universal than themselves. They're more likely to exit foster care to a permanent family if they cannot return to their parents. And that means that that family member, that kin care, is more likely to formally adopt them. I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but I left it in here because when you get the copy of the slides, I think you might want to look at it. Looking at, as a result of a child protective services, you have different kinds of licensure. And if it's outside of the child protective services, or parents may ask you to take that role, and then the kin decides to ask the courts to go forward with legal, which is what we did. Legal custody, we no longer have that guardianship because the child is back with one of the parents, and it was time. And that's a whole nother workshop too. How do you make that transition? How do you handle those feelings that go with giving up someone that you've had total responsibility for? But it's looking at the difference between inside and outside and what resources are there. When you get that call, or when someone says, can you take responsibility for my child? It usually happens pretty fast. And in many instances, you don't have any mental or emotional training. I mean, I come from the background of psychology, and I've been in the substance use field for 40 years. So when those calls came to me, I was probably more prepared than a lot of people, my husband and I. But not so many don't have that kind of training. And suddenly you're in this new role. A lack of financial preparation. Children cost money. A need for diapers and formula tonight. You're bringing the baby tonight. Need for appropriate car seat for the toddler. I can't go anywhere until I get that car seat, and they're very expensive. And boy, are they getting more expensive. I just bought one for my great-granddaughter. I wonder oftentimes how in the world I'm fortunate to still be working, and loving it, how a lot of our seniors are managing this, even with the resources. There's a lack of cribs or kids' bunk beds. And one of the biggest issues then is, how do you gain the information you need for health and medical concerns for those children when things happen so fast? Another one of my books that I really like. These books are just so much help when you have a child that you can kind of start to sit down with. So suddenly you're a parent again, or you're expanding your family if you're one of the younger Kincare. And it often begins with no warning or preparation. When I got a call sitting in my office in Springfield and the children were in Charleston where I lived, it was a matter of drop everything and go find out what's going on. And that night we haven't. They may have difficulty accommodating children in their current residence. Many seniors do, for many reasons. The residence may be too small. They may live in senior housing that you can't have. Oh, you can have your children come stay overnight for a weekend, but they can't move in with you. Unable to relocate due to affordability, and children may violate lease agreements. And some of your senior living centers. Residents may have safety hazards. My house was only about 12 years old at the time we got our granddaughters, but it wasn't prepared for young kids. It was for us at our age, the things that we did. And then when we got our great granddaughter, we had a big stove that we had put in to heat with, because I love to do that. We had a big stove. We had to literally build a fence that looked like crib railings around it to make sure that child was safe. You know, residents have safety hazards just because of the difference in ages. Caregivers may have disabilities, so relocating can always be an issue. Residents may not accommodate children with disabilities if they come with that. And relocation may be an issue regarding school enrollment. The things that hit you all at once can be really overwhelming. We don't have time to really do this, but the state of Illinois task force in looking at children put together a really quick quiz. And I put the questions in here, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the answers, but I think that it's things that you need to look at. Number one, is it necessary for a relative to have guardianship to enroll a child in school? If you have any comments or experiences you want to stick in the chat, do that. And Kyle can always let me know if there's something to share. But looking at that, in Illinois, it's very hard to get children in school, I will admit, because I tried. Even though I had guardianship, they didn't always like what I had to offer. But in Illinois, under the federal McKinley-Vento Act, youth that are not physical custody of a parent or a guardian are considered unaccompanied youth, and they're considered homeless, which gives them a right to attend school. Every school system, just so you know, if you're having trouble getting a child that you don't have guardianship for into school, they have a representative of the McKinley-Vento, and they're known as the liaison, and relatives should ask to speak to them, because as a homeless youth, you can get them into school. The school may argue with you, but that's the law. School enrollment obstacles, again, you may have to fight getting them in because you don't have proof of legal guardianship, or may not have it, but you have full-time care. There may be fees for out-of-district enrollment, maybe ineligibility for children with special needs for an IEP. But what in the workshops I've done where I've had grandparents, this was a biggie. Lack of access to progress reports, school records, informal custodial arrangement. Due to informal custodial arrangements, they've been moved from one school district to another to get them into Kincare, and getting those school resources is sometimes tough, but they have a right to be in school. Next quiz. Many grandparents raise their grandchildren without seeking or being granted custodial rights. Is it necessary for the grandparent to have guardianship in order to obtain a Social Security card for their grandchild? No, it is not. You can get a Social Security card for your grandchild. Is it necessary for the grandparent to have guardianship in order to obtain a birth certificate for the grandchild? Yes, it is. And that's what makes this a little bit crazy. How do you get the birth certificate that you need to get the Social Security card if you can't get it? I've been down that road. You have to work the system and get the resources as best you can. But it's confusing and it's tough. These are things that all Kincare run up against. Looking at legal issues, I wanted to check the time because I've got enough to do 3 hours. Many relatives provide care for children without legal custody or guardianship. Litigation is costly. Amen. Oftentimes, just to do a basic adoption process is about $6,000. And yes, there are some resources for people with lower income, but they aren't always very quick. They aren't always very thorough. and it often take a lot of time. Many relatives do not pursue custody or guardianship for financial reasons, or this is a biggie, and I know this fear, out of fear of angering the parents and losing their relationship with the children. So be aware of that. There's this whole emotional side that goes with this step by step of just trying to get through and survive the craziness that happens. You're glad that your grandchildren or your niece or nephew are safe, but it's also it's a burden to carry to start with. Next quiz. Grandparents often apply for medical services and public assistance to provide identification of the child. Which of the documents listed below must grandparents provide in order to acquire most services or gain access to vital records? And they list them: the birth certificate, proof of citizenship, social security card, medical records, proof of immunization. We know that, like it or not, most of those are required. So grandparents need to get those as fast as they can or as soon as they can. And if you're going through child welfare, oftentimes they're a good resource to help you do that. And there's also another resource that I'll tell you about in a minute. And looking at around health issues, the stress of caring for children can be overwhelming. Many children suffer from physical, emotional, or behavioral problems. Goes right back to the trauma. Oftentimes when they have looked for help in their middle of their chaos, nobody's really listened. People have said, oh, that can't be true. What they've said hasn't been validated, which makes it a lot harder for them to move forward and put any resolution to things. Some of those contributing factors include prenatal drug and alcohol exposure. There's a whole nother workshop, and we'll be doing that one next year too. There may have been sexual or physical abuse, definitely feelings of abandonment, even when they live in the same house, when the substance is more important than the child, or that's their feeling. It's tough. And then the last one is relocation stress syndrome. This is something that is coming out pretty strong. We're finding more and more. It's trauma related. What's going on with anyone that experiences relocation stress syndrome? That's often in the seniors that are being moved from their home to some other kind of care facility, but we're finding that it's becoming very prevalent with our children that are being moved out of the home, and their parents' role is being taken away. It's physical and psychological. It's a disturbance from transferring from one place to another. When my grandchildren were placed in our care, they no longer lived with mom, even though mom often stayed at our house in between places that she lived. That RSS often begins with a move, and it's just the beginning of the things that they have to go through. You as the caregiver and them looking at adjusting and grief. Because there are definitely grief issues for everyone, for the adults that take on that care, that feeling of, oh, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently, et cetera, et cetera. And the children who are caught right in the middle of the transfer drama. RSS is a set of symptoms that occur when an individual moves from one environment to another, and it influences your behavior, your mood, your physiological well-being. And it can happen to anyone at any age, but it's especially strong when children are moving to a new home or a new school. Even if that home's familiar to them, it's not the same. It's not the room that they had with the parent that they care about. And that attachment that children have with their parents, no matter what that chaos is, they might often be frightened of them, but they love their parents for the most part and feel guilty when they don't. Here's another book that I really like, Coping with Family Changes. Getting yourself together when things come apart. Helps the adult and it helps the children. It's a nice little workbook. This is what we want to see on our children's faces, whether they're in Kincare or with their parents. Barriers that may interfere with the family stepping up, family history and decision about what they want to do, the negative labeling. Well, I don't want to take those kids because people will say that, it's the stigma that's attached that we've got to overcome in this world. That scares some people, especially grandparents that come from a different generation with a different understanding of substance use disorder and mental health issues. Other barriers are just overlooking family strengths. Oh, I don't have the strength. I don't have the time. Yeah, you might have it. You just don't know it. Neglecting cultural or gender implications, that interferes. You need to recognize that. Family's perception of hopelessness, been down this road before, don't know if I can do it again, fear of failure, limited access to resources and support, which is what we're talking about here, excuse me, primarily in this workshop, and the limited finances. And then there's the fear and distrust of the healthcare system. It's often failed people, so it's very hard and very discouraging for them. Another quiz. For many grandparents, raising grandchildren, one of the most difficult challenges involves dealing with social service agencies and researching programs. And I think that looking at, is there a state program offering financial assistance where only the child's income is counted for eligibility? I had no idea that this existed. Even as much experience as I'd had 2 grandchildren placed in our care, but those were subsidized. Then we take on a grandchild in our 70s, great grandchild, voluntarily. So there was no subsidy. I'm very fortunate. I still work, and love what I do. But I did not know that, yes, there is that, and we'll talk about it in just a minute. Does the grandparent need to have legal custody of the grandchild in order for the grandparent to receive Medicaid? No, you don't. As long as you're taking care of that child. Must the grandparent receive Medicaid assistance in order for the grandchild to receive it? No, it can be a totally separate issue, and most often is if it's seniors. Can the grandparent apply for women, infants, and children? Yes, you can apply. That doesn't always mean you'll qualify, but they definitely will assess it, and in many instances it can be received. And then, are the children eligible for TANF, temporary assistance for families? Are they eligible for Medicaid health care assistance? Yes, they are definitely qualified. If the family receives TANF, they definitely can receive Medicaid. So let's talk about temporary assistance to needy families, which you can receive for 5 years. They have 2 types of grants. I want to check the time because I want to make sure we get through these resources. Oh my. There are 2 types of assistance, child-only grants and regular grants. Child-only grants are provided regardless of grandparents or kin caregivers' income. It is not counted. You have to fill out all the same forms, but it is not counted. And there's a very small grant of approximately $100 per month. This information all comes from Illinois sites. The thing is, it's more than $100 per month now. It's a little over $200. Children receiving this grant automatically qualify to receive medical assistance. If the caregiver is working, the child may also qualify for daycare assistance. And children can receive this until they're 18 if they're still in Kincare. And you do not have to be a formal guardian of the child, but when you fill out the form, you have to have someone that can verify that that child is in your care, and it is monitored and reassessed periodically. But that's the child-only grant, and Medicaid for the child makes them eligible for the child, and then it will pay basically full-time daycare if you have someone that's working, and that's a whole nother application system. So you need all that paperwork. You need the birth certificate, you need all these things. Even if you don't have guardianship, you have to have someone that can verify that you are caring for that child. This came from Generations United, and it just really looks at the national averages for the child-only grants, because that is a national thing. It's looking at if it's an unlicensed Kincare, they call it foster care, but if you just taken on the role of a child in the family, you can get about this on an average. This is with automatic Medicaid and payments through foster care system, and then kinship, guardianship, and adoption assistance. It's about the same amount. The DCFS Advocacy Office for Children and Families works as a liaison between the Department of Aging and DCFS. The Advocacy Office offers assistance to older caregivers involving the children who have been placed with them. And what they're finding, the Department of Aging, when I've met with some of the people recently, that terminology is Kincare. Before there was you had to be an older citizen before you could access those services. But now just about anyone 50 and over that needs this support and needs some of this help and advice, it's available for them. They have child advocacy centers. There's 30 of them around the state. They do parenting classes, tutoring, support groups. You can go online and put that in, looking at the family advocacy centers. They'll give you the people to contact. And I have those links in here that I will be sending you to. They also have the extend. Yeah.
We have somebody asking, could you send these slides to use in our home visiting work with grandparents? And also somebody else asked, where can I access the slides in this recorded webinar?
I will send that when I send their certificates. They'll have them by the end of the week. I will send those out to you. And at the end, there should be, I hope you can just click. If not, it at least tells you where to go. Yes, this is information that I wish somebody had sent me at once upon a time. We've got just a few more minutes to go here. The Extended Family Support System, which is through DCFS, can help obtain guardianship. It can help obtain the child-only grant and other entitlements, along with the Department of Aging. Those work very closely together with this. They can help enroll children in school. They don't have to have been removed by the department. This is just a program that they do have. Referrals for other services. And then there's cash assistance to obtain guardianship and to meet the child's basic needs. However, they don't do stipends. This is the number to call, the DCFS hotline, if you're interested in looking at that. And what you do is you say, I'm caring for my relative's child. I've been caring for them for more than 14 days. The child is not being abused and not neglected, but I need help. And I would like referred to the Extended Family Support Program. They can help you with all those other things and help you find the resources you need. Just understand that that doesn't provide a monthly stipend like the formal process of going through DCFS. Looking at the Illinois Department on Aging's grandparents and other relatives raising grandchildren. This program offers information to caregivers about available services, assistance to caregivers in gaining access to services. So if you have a Department of Aging center in your area, and they're all through the state, access those, find out where this program is funded and where it goes through. They can do some individual counseling, support groups, caregiver training. They can talk to you about respite care to enable caregivers to be temporarily relieved from the caregiving responsibilities. Different offices do different things. When we took on our great-grandchild and knew that we were going to file for guardianship, which was not inexpensive because we needed an attorney, I went and talked to our local one, and they didn't pick up the bill, but they were able to provide $200 towards it through the Grandparents Raising Grandchildren program, and that was greatly appreciated. I picked up when I was in the Department of Aging's lifespan here in our area, which is Central Illinois. And I was looking, they had a monthly thing that they handed out, and their grandparent guardianship support group and services has really grown. They do coffees, they do training, they do fellowships, they do advisory services, they provide respite information, a lot of things that weren't even available at the time we were needing that 5 years ago. Wonderful resource. Supplemental services. They provide supplemental services on a limited basis to complement the care provided by caregivers, to help with short-term caregiver emergency. I mean, this is a resource for our older people that are taking on this parenting role. And you can look at the local area agencies on aging by going into the Illinois website and pull all those up and find out where yours is. The last thing I want to share, I was tempted to really put a spider on here, is looking at the SPIDER system. It's a free comprehensive service resource database for youth and families in Illinois. It connects you to nearby organizations. I remember when this was formed. It tells you how long I've been around in this field. But it's information that you can go on there and look. There's 1,700 agencies and over 4,200 social services programs listed throughout the state of Illinois. The other thing that you may check into if you are a grandparent is Social Security. There are a couple of programs that if you have a grandchild in guardianship of, they may qualify for some subsidy. But we found that very difficult, and there were a lot of loopholes. I'll just tell you that right up front. But it's definitely worth looking into. Also, if the child has a parent that was deceased, you can check into it and make sure that they get what they should have coming for the parent as a result of the parent. The last thing I really want to talk to you, I mean, we could go on forever with this, but is looking at when children come into the household, usually unexpectedly, not just often, but usually grandparents or other kin, you have a tendency to put your own needs aside because suddenly everything has changed. My husband and I, the first go around, what we intended to have happen at that stage of our life didn't happen. We had 2 children, very much in need, plus our daughter that was struggling with everything that was going on. And it's been an interesting journey, and we've been very blessed. And here I am sharing this with you because I want other people to know you make it through it. I live the serenity prayer. I have had a husband with 40-some years of recovery. I have got a son with 15 years of recovery. I still have a family member that is some use, but is doing better than they were. I have lived what I share with people, and you can come out okay. You can by taking care of yourself. And I live the serenity prayer. You change the things you can and accept the things you can't, and you move forward. And that was a real awakening when I finally really realized that that's how I have to live to be healthy for me. And sometimes I have to remind myself it's not a done deal. Here we go. My Family, Your Family, another one of the books that I really like. Take care of yourself, manage your stress levels. And if you're working with family members that have taken on this role, if you are one of the family members that's taken on this role, if you're working in your communities, in your Ross groups, in your faith-based organizations, these are things that you can share with families that are going through this journey. Keep a healthy lifestyle as best you can. Take a break. Learn the strategies to manage your stress. And learn to say no to things you cannot or do not want to do. That was really hard for me because I'm a, oh, sure, I'll do it person. But that helped. And recognize when you're stretched too thin. Think about your physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual needs, whatever those might be. Go to your self-help groups that might support you. Sometimes that's tough because when you've got little ones in your care, it's not always easy to find daycare for them immediately. But think ahead. Do that when you can. Identify tools that will help you reduce stress and focus on yourself. Look at a balanced diet and stay active. Get quality rest when possible. Now, when you have children in the house, from 0 to 18, it seems like there's never a time that you really can get quality rest because there's always a developmental issue that you're listening for this at night, you're listening for that at night. What you're listening for with your teenager is much different than when you're listening for a 3-year-old or an infant, but get that rest when you can and access your medical care when you need it and monitor taking care of yourself. Again, this is just some examples. There's several of them here of what you can do to take care of yourself. Very similar. This is a good one though. Give yourself space to grieve because your life has changed. You're grieving for the children's that are grieving. You grieve for what's been lost for the person that you care about that you've assumed that role for. It's just looking at all these different things, and they'll be in the information that I give you. The one thing you need to be aware of is you can help lessen the impact of trauma on the children too. And there's a whole list of things. You play a protective role, you provide stability, you help build their senses of self-worth and self-esteem, understanding that they've had some pretty traumatic issues. Regularly tell your child that you love them and that you will love them no matter what. Because sometimes their reaction to all this is behavior that's hard to deal with, but you get help and you be consistent in letting them know that you care about them. Set firm, reasonable, and age-appropriate boundaries, etc. These are just some other things that I am just going to flip on through. Pretty common sense, but you will have those when I send out the slides. I like this, the kissing hand. It's especially helpful when you're going to be separated from the children for any reason. It helps them develop some kind of support system for them. We know that trauma and medical health signs vary, and this is especially true of a little older. I'd say 5 years on up, you can see these things that are there. And talking with your grandkids about all of this can be kind of hard, especially when you start seeing these symptoms. But there's a list of questions here that you can review, you can share with the people that you may be working with that could open up conversation with their charges, with the ones that they're taking care of, so that they can start to talk to each other and take care of themselves. Another good book. Here is the list of a lot of the things that I have given you. And in the books, you can just go on and pull the titles off of there. Most of these I have bought off Amazon, but you can get them other places. I want to share this with you. We are just putting this, the Inherent Strengths in Kinship Families. Dr. Joseph Crumley is one of the most impressive people in working with kinship training for caregivers and professionals for those child welfare workers that I've ever seen. He just retired this last fall out of his own private practice. He has put together a series of videos that are, he's wonderful. I've been to a lot of webinars that he has done, and he's just very personable. He knows what he's talking about and can share a lot of experience. And we purchased the videos. We are putting them on the website. There are 12 videos that address all different aspects of kinship for caregivers and child welfare workers. And he's done a lot of work in the substance use. He said the majority of his practice with families in Kincare was related to substance use disorders and mental health. And I just want to tell you to go on the website, and if you go under Kincare and Grand Families, those should be posted within the next 2 weeks. We've started it, but it's a pretty lengthy thing, and it's been with his permission. These are all copyrighted, but they are worth every bit of it, and I encourage you to take a look at that. We're also looking into how can we get it so that you can earn CEUs by viewing those. But I wanted to share with you that this is coming, and I know one of them's posted, but it takes a lot of time to download them the way they have been copyrighted. But we're doing it with his permission. I want to thank all of you for your interest. We will be sending out some links to some of the upcoming webinars. You will be getting a pretty big email from me by the end of the week. If you have questions, give me an email. I will be out of service starting the 10th of May for just a week and then back working on all of this. And if you have experiences or stories to share, let me know, because I have a place on the website to put grandparent stories. You know, we need to share, we need to let people know, and we need to get rid of the stigma that goes with all of this. And at the end of this, right here, I want you to read this. I would read it to you, but we don't have time. I'm going to sign off. I'm going to thank you. I'm going to say bless you if you have been down this road. I've been down it too, and we can share those journeys and come out strong. And there will be a survey or evaluation pop up when we're done. I would appreciate it if you would fill it out. And watch for the next go around. We're going to move up a step and we talk about Kincare next time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kyle. And I'm
Thank
going
you,
to,
Nancy.
and everybody that has participated. And I'm just flipping through the chat real quick. And I recognize some names, and thank you very much. Okay.